There is someone who keeps showing up when you close your eyes. You know exactly who I am talking about. You fall asleep, and there they are again, standing in a room that does not quite make sense, saying something you cannot fully hear, looking at you with an expression that stays with you long after you wake up. Maybe it is someone you loved once. Maybe it is someone you lost. Maybe, and this is the one that really unsettles people, it is someone you barely know. Someone who has no logical reason to keep appearing in the theater of your unconscious mind, night after night. And yet they are there, persistent, vivid, almost more real in the dream than they ever were in waking life. You have probably tried to shake it off. You have told yourself it means nothing. That dreams are just random firings of neurons, scraps of memory the brain is sorting through like old mail. But something in you does not believe that. Something in you knows that this figure, this recurring visitor, is not random at all. They are carrying a message. And the fact that they keep coming back tells you something important. You have not received it yet. I spent years dismissing my own dreams before I understood what Carl Jung had been trying to tell us for over a century. That the people who appear in our dreams are rarely about those people at all. They are about us. They are parts of us. Exiled fragments of our own psyche, dressed in familiar faces, knocking on the only door we cannot lock, the door that opens when we sleep. Jung called this process the language of the unconscious, and he believed, with a conviction that only deepened over decades of clinical work, that ignoring this language comes at a cost. The cost is not dramatic. It does not announce itself. It shows up as a vague sense that something is missing, as relationships that keep breaking along the same fault lines, as a tiredness that sleep itself cannot fix. The cost is a life lived slightly to the left of who you actually are. So, if there is a person who keeps appearing in your dreams, someone you cannot seem to escape even in the most private hours of your night, I want you to stay with me here, because what I am about to share is not dream interpretation in the way most people think of it. It is not a dictionary where water means emotion and falling means anxiety. It is something far more personal, far more precise, and far more transformative than that. It is the reason your unconscious mind chose that specific face, that specific person, to deliver a truth you have been refusing to hear while awake. And once you understand what that truth is, your dreams will not be the only thing that changes. Let me tell you what is actually happening beneath the surface of your life right now, because I think there is more going on than you have been willing to admit. When a specific person keeps appearing in your dreams, most people immediately jump to the most obvious conclusion. They think it means they are still in love. They think it means they have not moved on. Or they think, with a kind of embarrassed confusion, that they must be obsessed with someone they should have forgotten by now. But love, in the way we usually define it, is rarely what these dreams are about. Obsession is not what these dreams are about. What these dreams are about is something far older and far more essential than romance or attachment. You are dreaming about a part of yourself that you gave away. I want you to sit with that for a moment, because it might not make sense yet, and that's fine. But think about the person you keep dreaming about. Not what they look like, not their name. Think about what they represent. Think about the quality they carry. Maybe the person in your dream is someone who was fearless in a way you have never allowed yourself to be. Maybe they are someone who was wildly creative, emotionally open, dangerously honest. Maybe they are someone who hurt you, and in your dream they are not apologizing. They are just standing there, and the discomfort of their presence is the entire point. I once spoke with a woman named Clara, who had been dreaming about her college roommate for over 2 years. Not every night, but often enough that it had become a kind of haunting. They had not spoken since graduation, nearly a decade earlier. There was no unresolved argument, no dramatic falling out. They had simply drifted apart, the way people do. But in the dreams, the roommate was always doing the same thing. She was laughing. She was surrounded by people. She was painting or dancing, or doing something expressive and uncontrolled and free. And Clara would wake up, not with sadness exactly, but with this deep, formless ache that she could not explain. When we talked about it, I asked Clara a question that changed the direction of our entire conversation. I asked her when was the last time she had laughed like that? When was the last time she had done something expressive without calculating how it would be perceived? And she went quiet. Not because she did not know the answer, but because she did. The answer was that she had stopped doing those things years ago. She had built a career that required composure. She had married someone who valued restraint. She had become, by every external measure, successful and respectable and put together. But the woman in her dreams, the one who kept laughing, was the version of herself she had buried alive in order to become all of those things. That is what Jung would call the shadow. Not a monster. Not some dark evil twin lurking in the basement of your mind. The shadow is simply everything about you that you decided was not acceptable. Everything you tucked away, consciously or unconsciously, because at some point you learned that showing it would cost you love, approval, safety, or belonging. And the staggering, almost unbearable truth about the shadow is that it does not just contain your worst qualities. It contains some of your best ones, your wildness, your tenderness, your anger, your genius, your hunger for something more than what you have settled for. Jung wrote about this extensively, and one line from his work has stayed with me since the first time I read it. He said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." I must have read that quote 20 times before I actually felt what it meant. What he is saying is that the parts of yourself you refuse to look at do not go away. They go underground. They start pulling strings from the dark. They shape your choices, your attractions, your repulsions, your patterns, and they do it so subtly that you genuinely believe you are making free decisions, when in reality you are being moved by something you cannot see. And one of the primary ways these underground parts try to get your attention is through dreams. They borrow faces. They borrow voices. They stage elaborate scenes in the middle of the night because that is the only time your defenses are down enough to let them speak. There is a second layer to this that makes it even more profound, and it has to do with a concept Jung called the anima and the animus. If the shadow is the part of yourself you have rejected, the anima, or animus, is the part of yourself you have never even met. In Jung's framework, every person carries within them a contrasexual image, an inner figure that represents the qualities of their unconscious opposite. For a man, this is the anima, a feminine presence that embodies emotion, intuition, creativity, receptivity. For a woman, it is the animus, a masculine presence that carries assertion, clarity, intellectual force, independent will. These are not about gender in the social sense. They are about psychological completeness. When you keep dreaming about someone, especially someone you feel an intense but hard to explain connection to, it is often because that person has become the carrier of your anima or animus projection. Your unconscious has looked at them and said, "There, that is the face I will use to show you what is missing inside you." That is why the dreams feel so charged. That is why waking up from them feels like losing something precious. You're not missing a person. You're missing yourself. I want to tell you about a myth that captures this better than any clinical explanation ever could. In ancient Greek mythology, there is the story of Orpheus and Eurydice. And Orpheus, the greatest musician who ever lived, loses his beloved Eurydice to death. She is bitten by a serpent and descends into the underworld. And Orpheus, devastated, does what no living person is supposed to do. He follows her down. He walks into the realm of the dead, playing his lyre, and his music is so beautiful that even Hades, the god of the underworld, is moved. Hades agrees to release Eurydice on one condition. Orpheus must walk forward and not look back. He must trust that she is following him without turning to confirm it. You know how the story ends. Orpheus cannot resist. Just as they reach the threshold between darkness and light, he turns, and Eurydice vanishes. She is pulled back into the underworld, and this time forever. For centuries, people have read this as a love story about trust and loss, and it is that. But Jung and those who followed his tradition saw something else in it entirely. Eurydice is not just a woman. She is the soul. She is the anima. She is the unloved part of Orpheus that exists in the underworld of his unconscious. And Orpheus's fatal mistake is not that he loved her too much. It is that he tried to possess her with his gaze, to control the process, to drag the unconscious into the light on his terms, rather than letting the reunion happen in its own time, in its own way. This is what so many people do with the figures in their dreams. They either ignore them completely, or they try to analyze them into submission, to pin them down with interpretation, to turn them into something manageable. But the unconscious does not respond to force. It responds to relationship. It responds to patience. It responds to the willingness to sit in the dark and listen without demanding that the dark explain itself on your schedule. So here is the deeper truth about the person you keep dreaming about. They are not a ghost. They are not a lingering attachment. They are a messenger. And the message is always about integration, about becoming whole, about reclaiming something you lost or abandoned or never knew was yours. Jung once wrote, "The dream is the small hidden door in the deepest and most intimate sanctum of the soul, which opens to that primordial cosmic night that was soul long before there was conscious ego." What he is telling us is that dreams are not random. They are not noise. They are the soul's attempt to communicate directly with you, bypassing the ego, bypassing the stories you tell yourself about who you are, going straight to the raw, unfiltered truth of what you need. Now, I want to turn this back to you, because understanding the theory is one thing. Seeing yourself in it is another thing entirely. And I suspect, if you have made it this far, that you are already starting to see. Think about the person who keeps appearing in your dreams, not with your analytical mind, but with your body. What do you feel when you see them in the dream? Is it longing? Is it fear? Is it anger? Is it a strange combination of comfort and grief that does not have a name in English? Whatever you feel in the dream is the feeling you have been exiling from your waking life. The dream is not creating the emotion. The dream is showing you the emotion you have been refusing to feel during the day. Maybe for you it looks like this. You keep dreaming about an ex, someone you left years ago or someone who left you. And in the dream, you are not fighting. You are not reliving the breakup. You are just together. Quietly, normally. And you wake up feeling a sadness so deep it takes an hour to shake off. That dream is not telling you to go back to that person. It is telling you that when you were with them, you had access to a part of yourself that you have since locked away. Maybe it was vulnerability. Maybe it was the ability to be completely unguarded. Maybe it was passion, or spontaneity, or the simple willingness to need someone without shame. When the relationship ended, you did not just lose them. You lost the version of yourself that existed in their presence, and your unconscious is using their face to say, this part of you still exists, and it needs to come home, or maybe it looks different. Maybe you keep dreaming about a parent, a mother or father who appears in strange settings, doing things they would never do in real life. Maybe they are silent when they were never silent. Maybe they are kind when they were never kind. Maybe they are drowning and you cannot reach them. These dreams are not usually about your parents as people. They are about the parental complex you carry inside you, the internalized voice that still tells you whether you are good enough, whether you deserve rest, whether your feelings are valid. Your unconscious is staging these scenes because the complex is still running your life, and until you see it for what it is, you will keep unconsciously recreating the dynamics of your childhood in every relationship you enter. Or maybe, and this is the one that confuses people the most, you keep dreaming about someone you barely know, a coworker, an acquaintance, someone you met once at a gathering and never thought about again, except now they are showing up in your dreams with an intensity that borders on obsession. This is projection in its purest form. Your unconscious has recognized something in that person, some quality, some energy, some unlived potential that belongs to you. They have become a screen onto which your psyche is projecting the very thing it most needs you to see. The question is not, why am I dreaming about this person? The question is, what does this person represent that I have not claimed in myself? If you are recognizing yourself in any of this, I want you to do something. Leave one word in the comments. Just the word awake. Not for me. For you. As a marker that today, in this moment, you looked at something you have been avoiding. You let the dream speak instead of silencing it for another morning. Now that you can see the pattern, the question that matters most is, what do you do with it? And this is where most people get stuck. Because we live in a culture that treats the inner world as either entertainment or pathology. Either dreams are fun little stories you tell over breakfast, or they are symptoms to be medicated away. There is almost no space in modern life for the idea that your dreams are a legitimate form of intelligence, that they are trying to guide you somewhere you need to go. But Jung understood this. He did not just study dreams clinically. He engaged with his own dreams and the figures within them for decades, through a process he called active imagination. And what he discovered was that the figures in our dreams are not static symbols to be decoded. They are living presences within the psyche that can be encountered, spoken with, and ultimately integrated into who we are. Here is what this looks like in practice, not as a technique, but as a way of being. The first shift is simply this. Start taking the dream seriously. Not analyzing it. Taking it seriously. There's a difference. Analysis puts you above the dream, looking down at it, dissecting it. Taking it seriously, it means approaching the dream as if it knows something you do not. It means writing it down the moment you wake up, not on your phone where it becomes just another note in a sea of notifications, but in a dedicated place, a journal, a notebook you keep beside your bed. The act of writing the dream down is not just documentation, it is acknowledgement. You are telling your unconscious, I am listening. I received the message. And here is what happens when you do this consistently. The dreams start changing, they deepen. They become more vivid, more specific, more personal. It is as if the unconscious, having been heard for the first time, starts trusting you with more. The second shift goes deeper. Once you have the dream written down, instead of asking what does this mean, ask the dream a different question. Ask it, what do you want from me? And then sit with whatever comes. Do not filter it. Do not judge it. You might feel an emotion rise up that seems to have no source. You might suddenly remember something from your childhood that you have not thought about in 20 years. You might feel a pull toward something, a creative project, a conversation you have been avoiding, a truth you have been suppressing. Follow that pull. It is not random, it is the thread. There is a practice in many contemplative traditions, not just Jungian psychology, but in Tibetan Buddhism, in Sufi mysticism, in the ancient Greek tradition of dream incubation, where practitioners would sleep in sacred temples specifically to receive dreams from the gods. Across cultures and centuries, humans have understood something that modernity has forgotten. The dreaming mind is not inferior to the waking mind. It is not a lesser form of consciousness. In many ways, it is a more honest one, because it operates without the machinery of self-deception that keeps us comfortable during the day. The third shift is the most challenging, and it is the one that actually changes your life. It is this. Whatever quality the dream figure carries, the one you keep dreaming about, you have to start embodying that quality yourself. This is what Jung meant by integration. If you keep dreaming about someone who is fiercely honest, your work is to become more honest, not with everyone, not recklessly, but in the places where you have been lying to yourself. If you keep dreaming about someone who is tender and emotionally available, your work is to soften, to let people in where you have been keeping them out. If you keep dreaming about someone who was powerful, assertive, alive in a way that frightened you, your work is to find that power in your own body and let it exist without apology. This is not about becoming someone else. It is about becoming all of who you already are. Jung had a word for this process. He called it individuation, and he considered it the central task of human life. Not success, not happiness, not productivity. Wholeness. There is a neurological dimension to this that I find remarkable. When we suppress parts of our identity, when we chronically exile certain emotions or drives, the brain does not simply delete them. They continue to generate neural activity, particularly during REM sleep, which is when our most vivid dreams occur. Neuroscience has shown that REM sleep serves a critical function in emotional regulation, essentially processing the feelings that we could not fully process during the day. The recurring dream figure, the person who keeps showing up, is often connected to an emotional circuit that has never been properly completed. The feeling was started but never finished. The grief was initiated but never grieved. The desire was sparked but never acknowledged. And the brain, in its remarkable persistence, keeps presenting the unfinished circuit, night after night, waiting for you to close it. This is why simply understanding the dream intellectually is not enough. The integration has to happen in the body, in real choices, in the way you move through your days. You have to let the exiled emotion finally land. You have to let the suppressed quality finally breathe. And when you do, something shifts in your nervous system. The chronic tension you have been carrying in your shoulders, in your jaw, in your chest begins to soften, not because you did a relaxation exercise, but because the conflict between who you are and who you have been pretending to be starts to dissolve. You are no longer fighting yourself. And that is the most exhausting fight any human being can be in, the one against their own nature. If this is landing for you right now, I want to ask you something. Think about one person in your life who is going through their own version of this. Someone who has been restless, or lost, or quietly struggling with something they cannot name. Send them this. Not because I need the views, but because sometimes the words we need most come to us through the people who love us enough to say, I heard something today that made me think of you. I want to tell you what it looks like on the other side of this work, because I think you need to hear it. Not as a promise, because I do not make those, but as a testimony from someone who has watched this process unfold and enough people to know that it is real. The first thing that changes is not your external life. It is the quality of your internal silence. There is a difference between the silence of emptiness and the silence of fullness. And when you start integrating the parts of yourself that your dreams have been pointing to, you begin to experience the second kind. You are sitting somewhere ordinary, a bench at the park, the edge of your bed in the morning, your car in the parking lot before you walk into work, and you feel something you have not felt in years. Not happiness, exactly. Happiness is too loud a word for it. Something quieter than that. Something like being home, not in a place, in yourself. The dreams change too. The recurring figure either disappears, having delivered its message and been received, or it transforms, it becomes friendlier, calmer, less urgent. I knew a man named David who had been dreaming about his older brother for almost 5 years after his brother died. In the dreams, his brother was always in distress, always calling for help from a place David could not reach. Drowning, trapped in a building, standing on the other side of a glass wall. These dreams destroyed David's sleep and bled into his days. He was anxious, hypervigilant, unable to enjoy anything without guilt. When David began to understand, through months of patient self-examination, that the brother in his dreams was not his literal brother but a projection of his own grief, his own survivor's guilt, his own belief that he did not deserve to thrive when someone he loved had perished, the dream started to shift. One night, he dreamed that he and his brother were sitting together in their childhood backyard. It was summer. There were fireflies. His brother looked at him and smiled and said something simple, something like, "It is okay, you know." And David woke up weeping, but not the way he used to weep. This was different. This was the kind of crying that cleans you out rather than hollowing you further. It was completion. The emotional circuit, the one that had been open and sparking for 5 years, finally closed. That is what integration feels like. Not a fireworks display of transformation. Not a sudden leveling up into some enlightened state. It feels like a long exhale after years of holding your breath. It feels like putting down a bag you forgot you were carrying because you had been carrying it so long it felt like part of your body. Jung said something near the end of his life that I consider one of the most important things any human being has ever articulated. He said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." I want you to read that again in your mind. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Not who your parents wanted you to be, not who your culture shaped you to be, not who your wounds forced you to become in order to survive, but who you truly are underneath all of that. The person before the masks, the person before the compromises, the person your dreams keep trying to remind you exists. Your relationships change when you do this work. Not because you learn communication techniques or attachment theory, although those have their place. They change because you stop asking other people to carry the parts of yourself that you refuse to hold. You stop falling in love with your own projection and then feeling betrayed when the real person underneath it inevitably shows up. You stop punishing people for not being the archetype you need them to be. And you start seeing them, truly seeing them, maybe for the first time. That is what love actually becomes when you are whole enough to offer it cleanly. Not a desperate grasping for completion, but two complete people choosing each other with open eyes. Your relationship with solitude changes too. The person who has not done this work cannot be alone without distraction. The phone, the noise, the constant doing, all of it is designed to prevent the encounter with the self. But when you have started to integrate your shadow, when you have begun the dialogue with your unconscious, solitude becomes a different thing entirely. It becomes rich. It becomes generative. You actually want to be with yourself, because yourself has become someone worth being with. I will not pretend this is easy. It is not. There will be nights when the dreams get worse before they get better, when the unconscious, finally given permission to speak, starts saying things you are not ready to hear. There will be periods of confusion, of grief for the false self you are shedding, of anger at the people and systems that taught you to hide in the first place. Jung called this the night sea journey, borrowing from mythology the image of the hero swallowed by a great whale or a sea monster, descending into the darkness of the deep before emerging transformed. You cannot skip the descent. You cannot bypass the dark water. But you can enter it knowing that others have made this crossing before you, and they did not drown. Now I want to bring you back to where we started. It is the middle of the night. The house is quiet. You have just woken up from the dream again. The person is there again, the one who keeps showing up. The one your waking mind cannot explain. But something is different now. Instead of reaching for your phone to distract yourself, instead of rolling over and willing yourself back to a dreamless sleep, you stay with it. You lie there in the dark, and you let the feeling move through you. You do not name it yet. You do not analyze it. You just feel it. The ache, the recognition, the strange, almost sacred sense that something inside you is trying to be born. You are not crazy. You are not obsessed. You are not broken. You are being called. Called inward, toward the parts of yourself that have been waiting in the dark, patient as stone, for you to finally come looking for them. Jung once wrote, "Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakes." That is the invitation your dreams have been extending to you every single night. Not to interpret them like puzzles, not to fear them like omens, but to follow them like a thread through a labyrinth, knowing that at the center, the thing waiting for you is not a monster. It is the self you abandoned in order to be loved. And it is still there, and it still wants to come home. I want you to type something in the comments before you leave. Type the words, "I am listening now." Say it not as a hope, but as a fact. Let it be the first line of a new conversation between you and the deepest, most honest part of who you are. You have been dreaming about this moment longer than you know. The person you keep seeing when you close your eyes was never a stranger. They were the part of you that refuses to be forgotten. And the fact that you are here, that you stayed until the end, that you let these words reach the places you usually keep guarded, tells me something about you. You are closer than you think. Not to an answer, but to the question that actually matters. Not who am I supposed to be, but who have I always been? And now, in the quiet of whatever room you are sitting in, the dream is no longer waiting for the night. It is awake. And so are you.